you just go and quarrel somewhere else? I'm trying to get some sleep up here.
Belt up, you Welsh rabbit!
Oh, charming.
This is the story of how one Christmas Day episode in 1987 drew over 26 million viewers and marked the end of Coronation Street's golden age. Jean Alexander's departure as Hilda Ogden remains the highest-rated episode in the program's history. And what happened that night changed British television forever.
My dinner.
Never mind your dinner. Look at me Muriel. Me mountain's turned into a slaggy.
Christmas Day, 1987 rolled around, and families across Britain were still digesting their Christmas dinners when they settled in to watch something extraordinary unfold on their screens. Not a royal broadcast or major news event, but a charwoman from Weatherfield saying goodbye to the only home she'd ever known. 26.6 million people tuned in across the original airing and the repeat, making it the most watched Coronation Street episode ever broadcast. Yes, that record still stands nearly 40 years later. Understanding why this departure broke Coronation Street means understanding who Hilda Ogden was, and more importantly, who Jean Alexander was before she ever put on those curlers.
By the time I count 3, I'll sling you off.
Try it.
Will you get out the way? Come on. 1, 2.
Now, come on, look, Hilda.
Toxteth, Liverpool gave birth to Jean Margaret Hodgkinson in October 1926. And here's what surprises most people about her. The woman was absolutely nothing like the character she'd become famous for playing. Hilda Ogden shrieked gossip in curlers and a penny, whilst Jean Alexander came across as sophisticated, quietly spoken, and intensely private. 5 years as a library assistant in Liverpool preceded her stage debut in '49 at a theatre in Macclesfield. Over a decade passed with her grafting away in repertory theatre across northern England, earning just 10 quid a week. When she became a professional actress, she took the surname Alexander from her father's middle name.
How are we going to manage?
I'll be drawing my pension soon, am I?
Oh, aye. And how many pints of beer a week will that buy you? How many packets of fags?
By the time Coronation Street came calling in '64, she'd already hit her late 30s and spent years honing her craft in the theatrical trenches. Her agent presented her with 2 opportunities in '64, a 5-week television series or this new soap opera role, and Alexander actually worried that Coronation Street might be a blight on my career. Her agent convinced her otherwise. The understatement of the century, as it turned out. Marriage never happened for Jean. A semi-detached house in Southport became her home, first with her mother and later alone. Hilda cluttered number 13 with her wonky mural and flying ducks, whilst Jean quietly tended her garden and worked crossword puzzles. The contrast was so stark that when fans spotted her on the street and heard her natural accent, they'd exclaim, "Oh, don't you talk funny?" July 1964 brought Hilda Alice Crabtree to Coronation Street, having married the work-shy Stan Ogden back in December '43 after tripping over him in a wartime blackout.
Morning.
6 days of knowing each other preceded their wedding. The Ogdens bought number 13 from Jerry Booth for £565, and Hilda immediately set about becoming the street's unofficial town crier. 3 elements built the character's look: hair curlers, permanently worn beneath a turban-style headscarf, came first, and Jeanne based this on the munitions workers she'd seen at a factory in Speke during the war. The wraparound pinny followed, always slightly grubby from her cleaning work. And finally came the dangling cigarette, usually accompanied by Hilda's tuneless singing. The real genius emerged when Jean Alexander and Bernard started working together. Her own words tell the story. The character was originally written as a rather stereotyped character. After a few weeks, we thought this was going to get a bit boring, So we started playing against the script.
What I heard just now, I'd say you must be Kate Bush.
Most people don't recognise me with my curlers in.
What could have been a one-note harridan became something far more complex. A woman who bickered constantly with her husband, but would defend him to the death against outsiders. 2002 arrived with a poll of over 5,000 people voting Stan and Hilda as Britain's top romantic television couple, beating out Monica and Chandler from Friends. Not bad for a pair of Weatherfield scrubbers. That mural needs its own moment here, or as Hilda called it, her Muriel. Eddie Yates, Hilda's lodger, installed a wallpaper mountain vista in the Ogden's sitting room back in July 1976. 2 years later, Hilda added 3 flying duck ornaments. And here's the detail that tells you everything about Jean Alexander's perfectness as a performer.
What's up?
I think you know very well what's up, Stanley. Sit down.
Shut up, Auntie.
I said sit down.
The middle duck was placed in a famous nosedive position, and this was Jean's own idea. Before every filming, she'd check the duck was properly angled. British television gained one of its most iconic props. Hundreds of viewers contacted Granada Television asking where they could buy it. Replica sets of the flying ducks became best-selling merchandise. Kitsch made with love, the sort of decor choice that working-class families across Britain recognized from their own front rooms or their aunties' houses. The Rovers' return in employed Hilda as a cleaner, serving under the snobbish landlady Annie Walker, which gave her front-row access to every bit of gossip on the street.
And you know how they were withdrawn, Stanley? From the service till. Well, that's what the bank calls it. You'll know it better as the outside cash dispenser.
Jean's ability to find the pathos in the character elevated Hilda beyond mere comic relief. Hilda could make you laugh with her malapropisms and her shrieking voice, but she could also break your heart. Nowhere was that more evident than in November 1984. The early 80s found Bernard seriously ill. Multiple heart attacks in the 70s, a stroke in 75, and his health was rapidly deteriorating. April 84 brought hospitalization with severe arthritis. Another stroke hit in May. Gangrene set in, requiring leg amputation. August 27, 1984 arrived, and Bernard died at 69 years old. The producers made the decision to kill Stan on screen, and what they created became the most powerful scene in Coronation Street's history. November 28, 1984, gave viewers Hilda returning from the hospital carrying a small parcel of Stan's belongings. The camera followed her as she silently unwrapped a handkerchief, and inside were Stan's spectacles. She stared at them for a moment, and then she broke, completely broke. Silence ended the episode. No closing theme tune, just Hilda's grief filling sitting rooms across the nation. Real condolence cards arrived by the hundreds from fans, as though Hilda were a real person who'd lost her husband. The 1985 Royal Television Society Award for Best Performance went to Jean Alexander for that scene. Everything changed after the spectacles scene. Stan's absence left Hilda more vulnerable, more isolated, but also more independent. Lodgers Kevin and Sally Webster moved in, treated like surrogate family. Yet something fundamental had shifted. Jean herself later said, her other half had gone, and she would have just scraped along. I didn't want that. Late 86, early 87, found Jean Alexander with her mind made up. 1,614 episodes over 23 years, and she was done. This is where understanding the full story matters. It was entirely her decision. Granada didn't want to lose her, and the public certainly didn't want her to go, but Jean went directly to executive producer Bill Podmore and told him she wouldn't be renewing her contract. Her reasoning came down to this. 61 years old, she'd given Hilda 23 years, And then without Stan, the character had nowhere meaningful left to go. A 2010 interview captured her putting it plainly. It was the right time to leave, as the writers had run out of ideas for Hilda, and as a character, Hilda had run out of steam. Her other half had gone, and she would have just scraped along. I didn't want that. Public announcement of the departure triggered Save Hilda campaigns from fans. Mail bombarded Granada television. The News of the World ran the front-page headline, "Tara Chuck." Years later, Jean admitted there remained a large pile of letters unopened from her final months on the show. Jean Alexander remained resolute. She'd made her decision and stuck to it. An enormous challenge faced the writers. Killing Hilda was off the table. Audiences had already endured Stan's death 3 years earlier, and Hilda dying alone would have been unbearably bleak. Something different took shape, and they gave Hilda Ogden a happy ending. November '87 unfolded with the storyline taking shape. Burglars broke into the home of Hilda's employer, Dr. Lowther, and his wife Joan died from a heart attack during the assault. Hospitalization followed for Hilda, though she physically recovered. Psychologically, though, she became terrified of living alone at number 13. The house that had been her fortress, her pride, the home she'd shared with Stan, suddenly felt dangerous. Dr. Lowther, now a widower planning to retire, offered Hilda a position as live-in housekeeper at his cottage in Hartington in Derbyshire, a real village in the Peak District. And a fresh start appeared before her, a way out that wasn't death or defeat, but actually felt like a new chapter. Hilda accepted. Veteran Coronation Street writer Leslie Duxbury wrote the farewell episode, with John G. Temple producing and scheduling, placed it on Christmas Day, 1987. Historic in itself, it was the first time the program had aired on Christmas Day when it didn't fall on a regular broadcast day. The episode opens with Hilda expecting nothing more than a quiet drink with the Websters. Sally and Kevin organize something simple, a low-key send-off, but Bet Lynch and the residents of Coronation Street had other plans. Walking into the Rover's return, Hilda found the place erupting around her, a surprise farewell party with every resident present. The camera catches Hilda's face, and Jean's performance here is masterful, showing shock, gratitude, love, and the dawning realization that she genuinely mattered to these people. Gifts came from the residents, a carriage clock that was practical, something she could take to her new life, and heated rollers, a cheeky nod to those permanent curlers she'd worn for 23 years. Hilda gave a speech, and her voice cracked when she said, "I'll be leaving my heart behind in this street." The episode's most celebrated moment came later, when Hilda returned to number 13 for the last time. Alone in the house, the camera stayed on her as she looked around at the walls that had contained her entire adult life. Then she spoke, directly to the room, to the ducks, to the mural, to Stan's memory. "I've come in here more times than I care to remember. Cold, wet, I'm tired out, not a penny in me purse, and the sight of them ducks and that mural, well, they've kept my hand away from the gas tap, and that's a fact. Devastating doesn't even cover it." One sentence revealed the depths of her struggles, the poverty, the exhaustion, the moments when she considered ending it all, and what saved her were 3 plastic ducks and a wallpaper mountain scene. The tackiest, most ridiculed bits of decor on British television, but to Hilda, they represented home, hope, and the life she'd built with Stan, however humble it was. Back at the Rovers, the episode concluded with Hilda leading the patrons in singing "Wish Me Luck as You Wave Me Goodbye" in her trademark trilling voice. Kevin and Sally Webster received number 13, and Hilda walked out of Coronation Street for good. Staggering doesn't begin to describe the viewing figures for that Christmas Day episode. Just under 18 million viewers watched the first showing, and when the omnibus repeat aired 2 days later, on December 27th, another 8.6 million tuned in. 26,629,000 viewers. That's the combined Barb aggregate. Context matters here. Coronation Street regularly attracted 15 to 20 million viewers in the 80s, so this wasn't just good, it was extraordinary. For a single character departure, though, nothing has ever come close. Comparisons tell the story. Jack Duckworth's death in 2010 drew 11.6 million, and when Vera Duckworth passed away in 2008, 12.5 million watched. Both significant figures, but nowhere near Hilda's farewell. Christmas Day found 26.6 million people stopping what they were doing to watch a working-class charwoman leave Weatherfield. That tells you everything about who Hilda Ogden was to British audiences. Before we talk about how the show changed, the recognition this character received deserves its moment. 1982 brought a poll ranking Hilda as the fourth most recognizable woman in Britain, behind only Queen Elizabeth II, the Queen Mother, and Princess Diana. A fictional cleaning lady from a soap opera was more recognizable than virtually every other woman in the country. 88 made Jean Alexander the first soap performer ever nominated for a BAFTA Television Award for Best Actress, and the next soap actor to receive that honor wouldn't come along until June Brown in 2009. TV Times readers voted Hilda the greatest soap opera star of all time in 2005. The British League for Hilda Ogden, established in '79, had Lord Laurence Olivier as its president, with Sir John Betjeman, the poet laureate, on the committee. Members wore lapel badges featuring Hilda in her curlers. Olivier himself expressed a wish to appear on the program, though his schedule prevented an intended uncredited cameo in January '78. One of the greatest actors in British history wanting to be on Coronation Street specifically because of Hilda Ogden tells you everything about the character's cultural significance. Coronation Street's last link to its golden age disappeared with Hilda's departure, and December '87 arrived with all the program's original era icons already gone. Ina Sharples left in 1980 with Violet Carson's retirement. Annie Walker departed in '83 when Doris Speed stepped down, and Elsie Tanner exited in '84 after Pat Phoenix's departure. Now Hilda. 15.16 million. That was the average audience for 1987, already down 400,000 from the previous year. The show began to shift, without its iconic characters. Jack and Vera Duckworth partially filled the void, their bickering but devoted relationship explicitly modeled on Stan and Hilda, and audiences loved them. The tone of the program was changing, though. David Liddermont, was the new producer, introduced a new exterior set, modern production techniques, and a third weekly episode in October '89. The pacing accelerated and storylines became more sensationalist. Still Coronation Street, but something essential had been lost. Open criticism came from Jean Alexander herself. 2005 found her refusing to return for any special appearances because of the show's overemphasis on who's sleeping with whom. The Daily Mirror heard from her in 2014. In the days of Hilda Ogden, Annie Walker and co., the street was gentle, funny, and human. The humor has all but gone out of it. Jean Alexander died peacefully in her sleep on October 14, 2016, and Monday's Coronation Street episode carried a dedication to her memory, and William Roach called her performances incredibly moving, and said she could make you laugh but also make you cry. Hilda Ogden's departure marked the end of a specific kind of British television, an era when soap operas were genuinely about ordinary working people struggling through ordinary working lives with humor, dignity, and resilience. That's what she represented. Cleaning toilets at the Rovers was Hilda's job. She gossiped over the back fence, couldn't afford proper holidays or fancy clothes, and her marriage was far from perfect. Endurance defined her. Joy came from her plastic ducks and her wonky mural. She loved Stan despite his faults, and when he died, she carried on. Chess Christmas Day in 1987 found Britain watching a charwoman say goodbye to her terraced house and feeling it in their bones because Hilda was them, or their mum, or their nan, or the woman down the street who always had time for a chat and a cup of tea. John Alexander played Hilda without a shred of condescension, finding the humanity in a character who could have been a punchline and turning her into one of the most beloved figures in British television history. Something irreplaceable left with Hilda when she departed Coronation Street. The show continued, still going today, but it's never quite recaptured what it had when Hilda was there, curlers in, pinny on, singing tunelessly whilst polishing the bar at the Rovers. Christmas Day, and 1987 brought 26.6 million people watching Hilda Ogden leave Weatherfield. They watched her say goodbye to her ducks, her mural, her neighbours, and the only home she'd ever really known. Watched her walk out of Coronation Street and into history. That's why it broke Coronation Street, because when Hilda left, an entire era went with her, and British television has never been quite the same since. Tara Chuck.